Students complete a capstone project as part of a group, so that part of a group, and the group can be up to 5 or maximum 6. And they do this for a public health client. So it's a relevant public health issue and for a public health client. The project integrates competencies that are important for public health and that are learned throughout the program. And the groups need to identify those competencies that they're integrating as part of their work. I also just thought I'd mention that PebblePad has been used at a program level, starting in the foundation. We have a foundations course, so the first course of the program, to reflect on the required competencies that are needed throughout, like as part of a public health professional, like the competencies that are needed for an MPH student. They're reflected on throughout the program, and it starts in the foundations course. They also reflect on them at the midpoint, and then again at the end of the capstone, they do that as well. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're primarily going to focus on the capstone course and the opportunities for peer review. So this was a spring term course, and there's initial contact with the students during the winter term. So we let students know that there is a group project. We encourage them to get together and determine who is in their group, or we sort of help to try to put them together in a group. And I held meetings with each of the groups during the winter term, and we worked to try to ensure that each of the groups had a public health client and a topic that would be something that they would work on in the spring term. So the use of PebblePad for this course was something that was very carefully planned out during the winter term. So and that included instructions, examples. We also had purposely put together an open office hour to support the use of PebblePad in the first week when something was due. So we did hold that. We taped the session and we made it available to the students. And in the course, there were 2 opportunities for peer review. And I guess the main reason for this is that I was the instructor for the MPH, and I have a particular expertise. My expertise is in health evaluation, but there are many other areas of public health that are really, really critical. And the opportunities for peer review recognize the stage of the program that the students are in. Almost all of the students by the end of the program had some type of experience in public health. Most of them were working in public health at that time. And so this recognizes the fact that they are about to embark. Some of them are already in their public health career, and others are about to embark in their public health career. And it's recognizing that they are experts, and many of them have various expertise, and it's different than my expertise. So the opportunities for peer review were recognizing the stage of the program as well. So there were 2 opportunities. One was at the very beginning of the course. At the end of the first week of the course, the students were asked to submit a project overview and a group contract. And there was an opportunity for every student in the class to provide feedback to the other groups on their project overview, on each group's project overview and group contract. The idea behind that is that it would give each group some tangible ways that they could work to improve what they were doing, or considerations for them for their project. And they had just over a month after that, or maybe it was about a month, before they presented their group presentation. And so it would give them time to, modify their plans, change some of their ideas before they needed to do the group presentation. There was then there was another opportunity for peer review. There is a synchronous portion of this course where there's some different sessions with public health professionals, but an important aspect of this course is also presenting their group projects to the rest of the class at the stage that they're in with respect to their project. So each group was given the opportunity to share in an hour what they had been doing for their client and to ask for feedback from their peers. And they were given peer feedback at this stage as well. And then after the presentation, they had a little over a month to modify what they were doing and then prepare a written document, and that was assessed by myself as the instructor. And then the use of PebblePad also included instructions at the very beginning on how to sort of prepare an e-portfolio. And the idea was that the first part of the e-portfolio included the project overview and the group contract. And then the second, then there would be also the presentation, the group presentation, and then the written document would also be part of the e-portfolio. And so those instructions were provided at the very beginning of the course, and it started with the project overview and group contract. So the e-portfolio sort of was fairly straightforward and fairly simple, and groups could take it in any way they wanted to. And so it'll be great to hear from Jahaira. She used some of her creativity to show, what she did, what the group did, and went above and beyond what was required. Here, I'll just show, this is the Learn page. And then going into the content, we had a whole section on the project overview and group contract. And so as you can see, there are many different steps, but we walked students through each step. So the first link here is the PebblePad Plus link, and it basically just takes you to PebblePad. And so, we tried to put little instructions here. So when you're ready to start creating your group portfolio, click on this link. And then we also provided instructions. And so that was create and submit your group portfolio. And I'll just go here so that we don't, so there were some detailed instructions with screenshots showing the students what to do and how to do different things. So there were a number of steps, and then if anyone had any challenges, and some individuals probably didn't necessarily go through all of these steps in a organized way and really were struggling with this, so we had an open office hour that we recorded to be able to help students with that. I also just wanted to mention that for the project overview and group contract, we wanted to provide structure to the students for the feedback that they provided, but we also didn't want to be too rigid. So we were trying to balance that. So part of the idea was that we were trying to give students an idea of what was expected for the course and what was expected for the project overview and group contract. So we did include some elements that were required, and we gave a couple of readings to the students to help them with the group contract. And gave them a checklist for what to include. And then students, when they did their peer review, they could complete this rubric. And then they were able to document overall comments and the response to the group questions. So something that I'll mention is I really struggled with this because we wanted to provide parameters to the students for expectations for what was required, but also not want to, make it too rigid for the students. So try to emphasize that there is flexibility here. So the feedback received was anonymous, was anonymized in order to be fair to the students that provided the feedback. But then after the presentation, we let the students know that their feedback, their names would be shown. And the reason that we thought that would be most helpful is because then the groups could go back to the people that provided the feedback and get additional information. It's just, generally when you're reviewing for journal articles and things like that, you're told explicitly if your feedback is going to be associated with your name. So I just felt really, I felt that it was critical that we gave them the information that they knew that their names were going to be associated with their comments. But anyway, you can see that, there was there was some quantitative information from the rubric, But the real value in terms of the peer feedback came from these comments here. And I just have to say that I was amazed. Some students really took a lot of time to provide feedback, and there were some tangible. I'm not sure if there were in this particular example. Like there's lots of feedback here about experience with different advisory groups, or some students provided articles, scientific articles to look into, gave the names of nonprofit organizations that they might want to include. Some of them had expertise in social media, so they provided some very specific comments. So you can see there's a lot of detail. Some students really took the time to provide detailed feedback. And the other thing was that I had a TA for this course, and the teaching assistant was able to pull this feedback together, and took a look at all the feedback, made sure that it was constructive, shared it with me, and then when I shared it back to the PebblePad workbook, I also was able to add some additional comments if I wanted to. You can see there's an article provided here. Someone suggested using an article, or they may have had certain expertise in various areas, and we're able to provide detailed feedback here. So this is much, like, I just have to say that the feedback that was provided was much more than I could provide as an instructor, because I have some experience with some of these things, but I just felt that the feedback was really, really useful. So we provided parameters and guidance to support the process. And it did take some time and effort to really think through what the rubric would look like and things like that. Valued the expertise within the class. And through that process of having the students review their peers' work, it also allowed them to learn from each other. So some of them hadn't had very much experience with PebblePad, or maybe that wasn't sort of a forte of theirs. But the great thing too was that they were able to sort of look at what other students did in terms of their PebblePad work, and it got their creative juices flowing. So for the next submission, they were able to do more. And also, I know Jahaira actually provided some instructions for students, because she figured out ways to use PebblePad that were not necessarily things that I even knew. And so she provided instructions about how to capture screenshots and how to share her presentation in ways that I wasn't even able to do. As well, we just received some comments from different students that they valued the feedback that they received from their peers. They felt that it was helpful, and they were able to use that feedback to sort of get them to reconsider some of their ideas for their project. So I just wanted to also mention that planning and preparation is needed. And I know someone had mentioned that sometimes PebblePad has been like they like using it, but there's some things that you need to think about, and I agree. I think that it needs to be planned carefully, and so really the process was thought through and developed over the winter term, and I received some fabulous support from Center for Teaching Excellence, Catherine, and from CEL, including Natalie. So great support was received, and also I was attending the PebblePad user group meeting, so have encountered some great ideas from PebblePad as well, Gail Ring specifically, and others. Instructions are really important for students to feel comfortable with this, and some people are really comfortable with technology and other students not so much, and so that's why having the open office hours are important, because some people don't follow the instructions with the screenshots as well as other individuals, and we found that when we had an open office hour and we said, well, why don't you share what you've got, or let's go into your PebblePad, let's have you share your screen with us. And when we did that, it actually was uncomfortable for the student, I'm sure. Because I know as an instructor, when I had to do that with Catherine, sometimes it was uncomfortable for me as well, but it gets the student using it and realizing sort of where they need to go to navigate. So felt that the open office hours were really helpful for students, especially those that are not tech savvy. The other thing that I'll say is that we, as I mentioned before, we've used PebblePad at a program level. One of the drawbacks with that is that it's used, at the very beginning of the program, and then it's used at the midpoint. We encourage students to use it throughout their program and add evidence to their workbook, etc. But some students don't do that. And so because there's so much of a time lag between when they do the first work and when they do the second, and maybe even when they get and their feedback and how they use the feedback, they sort of have to learn it again each time. The great thing about using it in this course in this way was that in the very beginning of the course, we asked them to do the project overview and group contract as part of the e-portfolio. And then that same week, the same week, we asked them to complete peer feedback using a PebblePad link. And then we provided feedback the following week. So there were iterations where they were using PebblePad, accessing the feedback. They got feedback pretty much immediately. So all of that was very helpful. And then they also used it for, throughout their learning journey in the Capstone course. So all of that was, I think, an effective use of PebblePad, and it enabled people to sort of learn it quickly and not forget it in between. At least I hope that was the case, but Jahaira can speak more to that.
Just wanted to share a little bit of backgrounds. So when I heard of PebblePad, it was the first time using this during the MPH capstone. So Professor is right, Professor Yessis. I believe this was implemented in 2019 where students had to use PebblePad throughout the program, but I started the program in 2018. And therefore I had never even really heard about PebblePad. So when I heard of this, I was like, this is kind of cool. This is something I've never used. And I do like technology. I like to play with things on my own and get creative. And that's one of the things I liked about PebblePad is that fosters creativity and allows you to really do whatever you want. So I spent quite a few hours. I think it was 3 hours at the beginning to create the main one. Now I do have to say, what it looks like today is not how I started. The first round, it wasn't as nice, but I kept going back into PebblePad and making it prettier and changing the colors, and I added a bunch of things that I want to show you today. So this first page is just the welcome page that I created just to showcase the main highlights of our project. So you can see I embedded a video in here. This was done at the end after our presentation. And the reason being, we weren't able to share this video during our actual presentation to the class. So I was like, oh, it bugs me that we couldn't share such a nice video. How do I incorporate it into our project? So then I figured out a way to embed it into PebblePad, and it was I was happy because it's there. So that's that. And then just a little short, summary of our project for the MPH capstone project here. It's about climate change and health. I added some images, played around with the background, and then I decided to also play around with the quote feature and added quotes throughout our portfolio. So this is how you would access our e-portfolio, would be the main page. So that was the first tab. The second one was about meeting our group members, because all these tabs were required. Professor Yessis gave us an outline of the tabs that we needed to include in our portfolio. So this one, again, is just our information, our email addresses, and of course, trying to, make it pretty and appealing. I added a few images there. And then feel free to add in there anything if I forget to add, Professor Yessis. Then the next tab is our group contract. So we did spend quite a bit of time creating the group contract. We try to be as detailed as possible. Our group was very diverse. We had doctors, nurses, public health inspectors, dietitians. So we all had different priorities as well. So we needed to really ensure everybody knew what they were doing. We were very detailed. We added what our skills were so we could understand what our strengths and weaknesses were, our roles, what we were going to play in different meetings. We had specific code of conduct in terms of our activities like temporal or procedural, behavioral, how long our meetings will be, when we will meet. All these things were outlined. And then we did create a nice little schedule of when we were going to do everything from the beginning of the course all the way till the end. We had outlined things like deadline of when we had to complete our sections. If we were having difficulties, we needed to let the team know, and then when we needed to proofread. Like, it was really outlined as best as we could. This section I constantly had to go back and edit, because I'll share a story in a minute why we had to do that. But this is kind of how it kept us organized during the term. We had a little bit about conflict management, because all teams, there's different dynamics. We all, have different personalities, so we had that outline as well. Now, interesting about our project, when we first met with Professor Yessis and our client, we were going to do a social marketing plan. And the social marketing plan was about increasing awareness of climate change among youth. So we're like, let's do social marketing. So at that time, this was back, I think it was May, I believe, or was it April? I can't even remember now. It was way early. It was even before the course started. We were trying to be keen and get this going, because we're towards the end of the program. We want to be done. So then we're like, okay, social marketing plan it is. So we started doing some research, and then I think a couple of weeks, about 3 weeks after, we met again with the client, and they said, you know what, social marketing plan is not going to work for our campaign. And we're like, okay, so fair enough. This is public health. Things change on you. We get it. So then we had to go back to the drawing board and change. Mind you, by then we had already received feedback on the social marketing plan, and we're kind of heading that way. So we had to switch gears, redo the whole pitching document, send it to Professor Yessis and our client, and then upload the new one again, which we did, right? So that was a learning lesson for us, real life experience, where you think things will go a certain way and then they don't. You have to change gears. And one of the biggest lessons I learned during this course is you need to be flexible, and it's not about what you want, it's about what the client needs, because that's the only way it'll be helpful, right? What you're going to do. So we changed the project pitch. We decided to do a communications toolkit for Ontario Public Health Association. That was our client, and this was well received, and we went ahead. I do want to bring your attention to, I think it's this section here. So our first round through of the project overview, we were supposed to identify our competencies, and these are the ones we picked. And one of the feedback we received from our peers was that we didn't really specify how or what exactly we were doing during the project that, I guess, showcases that we achieved this competency, that we're working on this. So that feedback was incorporated into the oral presentation, and I'll show you in a minute. So, and by looking at other people's, other group members' page and PebblePad, we're like, yeah, everybody seemed to say competency X, Y, and Z, and they explained why they picked the competency or how the project achieves that. And we didn't do this at this point. So we're like, okay, we need to add that during the presentation. And then the oral presentation, it was awesome. It was really enjoyable to share our project with the group. It was a little different than the other groups, because remember, we had to change gears. So we had to say, hey, I know we shared with you a social marketing plan, but now we are showing, or we are discussing a communications toolkit, and this is what we're doing. So this is the presentation slides, and all 5 members of our group took turns to discuss different sections of our presentation. And one of the last slides I just want to show you here, it's the public health competencies. You can see that we try to tie it in as to which task is linked with that specific competency, so that we could showcase how we're actually accomplishing this. And we try to be creative. We use things like Slido to just have more interaction, and the class really enjoyed this. We were trying to not make a boring presentation, because, I find sometimes if you do all the talking, there isn't that engagement with, the audience. So we try to be a little less informal and get feedback throughout the presentation instead of waiting till the end. And that was really well received. They all needed to, of course, access Slido through their phone and be able to vote, but we got really good feedback on how to develop our social media posts, because we wanted to provide sample for our clients of, okay, we're doing a communications toolkit, but we want to use social media because that's how we reach youth today. And these are some examples of different social media posts that you can use for Facebook or Instagram. So this was the presentation. Now, after the presentation, that took me a while, because I was thinking, how on earth am I going to add a PowerPoint presentation in PebblePad in a way that it looks nice, that it's easy to follow? And I played around. I said, okay, should I do 1 slide at a time? And I tried it. I'm like, that looks terrible. Okay, should I do 2? Should I do 6, 9? And I found 4. was the nicest, I guess, the best looking way of showcasing. And I made sure that it had the numbers. So like 1, 2, 3. So whoever came into our page would be able to like follow along the presentation this way. So this is what I tried, and I shared it with Professor Yessis. I was like, this is what worked best for me, was taking a screenshot, print screen on my desktop, saving it as an image, and then uploading each one of these. So this is one image, this is one image. One by one, you have to upload it into here. And then there's a couple of features in PebblePad that you can make it bigger, you can make it nicer, you can make backgrounds. So I did all of that, and then this is what I found looked the nicest, the most appealing, at least to me. So that's the presentation. And then the last step was our Capstone final report. So this one I did after the course was completed, because we had to receive feedback from our professor and TA, share this with our client, and then finally went back in there and shared. And this was another creative moment. I said, I don't want to copy and paste a whole report that's 80 plus pages. Like, I personally wouldn't go into any website and read that. Like, it's just overwhelming. So then I thought, playing around with PebblePad, remember, this took me probably longer than somebody that was familiar with the program. With PebblePad, I was completely new. I've never used this program before, or platform, I should say. So the instructions that the Professor Yessis provided were really helpful, and also just playing around. I do find it's very intuitive to me. Like, I just play and things seem to just, I don't know, it wasn't too hard to figure out. So here there was a way to upload the report into PebblePad, just add it on, and then create a link to the report. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it. And this is exactly what I did. I created a little image of a report where it looks like, and if the person is interested, they can go and download it. And it will just, I'll show you here. So we'll just open it, I guess. You can also open. And it will open the full report. As you can see, it's really long because we had to do 2 reports. One was a short 15-page brief summary for a professor. So this is the table of contents and our nice and short summary of the big report, which I'll show you. But you can see that it's overwhelming, right, to have this right on like the portfolio. So a link I found was a little more user-friendly. And this is the actual toolkit that was provided to our client. This would be the one. And again, it's really, really long. I won't bombard you with that. So let's go back. Yes, and then that's kind of how it goes. And I do want to highlight, like what our Professor Yessis said, it's iterative process. Like, I went back in there, I don't know how many times, I was on top of it. But I had a motivation because personally, I am not in public health yet. I work as a dietitian. I'm more clinical focused right now. So I saw this since the beginning, even before completing the course, as an opportunity that I can use this on my resume, which is what I'm doing. Like, I've already added the link of PebblePad into my resume to showcase some of the skills that I've done because I'm not currently working in public health. So maybe that's one of the reasons why I feel very strongly, like I took over this entire project and I'm like, I'm going to make our page really nice because I really wanted to ensure that it was done nicely and lots of effort and that it looked really professional and also creative as well in terms of like how it looked and just the presentation overall. And yeah, and that's our project in a nutshell. Any questions, or let me see if there's anything else I should share. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Gail had said, I hope you will get a PebblePad alumni account before you graduate. So that is something that we did emphasize in this course, that so our Learn platform, our learning management platform at University of Waterloo, does not allow students to keep the course materials, etc., for too long after graduation. I don't even think you can keep it after graduation, but also you don't maintain it necessarily even throughout your program. So we sort of promoted the benefit of being able to get an alumni account and also keep, so Jahaira kept a public link as well and shared that with her teammates so that they could use it on a resume. Like, the other thing about it that we've encouraged is, it helps, if you are in a meeting, it helps you articulate your learning journey because you've gone through various steps. So you can actually, walk them through the different steps. So we did encourage that and gave specific instructions. And I do think we met with a couple of students as well to show them how to do that.
That's right. And it is an extra step because I remember emailing Jennifer saying, how do I make this public? Because I was worried that all this great work that we had done as a team, I wouldn't have access once my Waterloo ID is gone, right? Because I knew I was graduating in the fall. So it was another little step. It wasn't difficult, and I did share that with her because I managed to figure out, I thought it was a certain way, but there was an extra step needed to make it public because it wouldn't work the first time I did it. So then I went into PebblePad website to try and find, because they also have instructions, and I figured out a way to make it public. I share it with the team. They're more than happy to have access to the link as well, because it was a lot of work in a very short period of time, and I think it's a great way to just showcase all the great work we've done, right? And like, this is our final project in the entire program, so it kind of ties a lot of things that we've done throughout the program in one. So I really appreciated Professor Yessis doing this and allowing us to create a portfolio of our project, right? So that we can have access to it anytime after graduation.
So Diane asked a question about whether each group member had to make their own or whether it was done at the group level. It was actually done at the group level. Mm-hmm. So individuals had to provide peer feedback. Each individual had to provide their own feedback on every group, but the actual e-portfolio was done at the group level. But they could take it away with them at an individual level, so they could keep an individual copy. And there is a question too. Did you share that link with OPHA?
I didn't. I know for whatever reason I didn't. I should. I know Jennifer had mentioned to me you should probably share this with OPHA, but I haven't. But I do. It's on my to-do list because they haven't seen it all come together like this. They received our deliverable, our final report, our toolkit, I guess, but they haven't seen this. No. Yes. So thank you. Yes, good feedback. Probably share this. And I think there was one more thing I wanted to share was about, oh yes, the peer feedback. So personally, I can say I really enjoyed having some sort of rubric or guidance as to how to provide feedback, because I always strive to provide, feedback that is useful and that could actually improve the project. Even if I wasn't experienced in that area, I would try, maybe do a little bit of research so I could give meaningful feedback. So I think it was appreciated that for most of our team too, that we had the rubric as well. And I found the process really easy. So you go in there, you add a title, you start writing, and it auto saves for you. So you don't have to constantly click save, and you can come back to it anytime, and it's all there how you left it, and you can continue. Because sometimes I couldn't finish them all, while I was there, I had to let it go and come back. So that was really nice. Finding the feedback was really straightforward. I didn't think it was hard at all. There were some icons, and you would click, and the feedback, you can download it, and it was available. Same for, there was some feedback we had to retrieve, I believe, through our portfolio. It was Jennifer let us know, you have to go here and download it. But we never really had an issue accessing feedback, providing. It was all done very quickly. And I also like the turnaround. Once you provided the feedback, you would receive it within a week. And it was so helpful to receive feedback throughout and be able to refine the project as we went. And I think that's one key learning, I think, is to, as a group, not wait till the end to make changes as you go. So I finished the presentation, I added my slides the next day. I finished the report, we added that as well, right? Because then that's a lot easier than making all these changes at the end when it's just overwhelming, right? And everybody's tired and we're just mentally fatigued and done. So that's one good thing. Just as you get feedback, update your PebblePad portfolio.
Katie had a question about the anonymous feedback versus the feedback that was identifiable to the individual. From my perspective, from an instructor perspective, when I reviewed the feedback, I didn't see any major difference between the two types of feedback. I actually think part of the reason for that was that I don't think students necessarily really even thought of that when they were providing the feedback. I just personally didn't feel comfortable sharing their names if they didn't know explicitly that their names would be shared. And so that's why I changed it, because I realized, when I saw the feedback, I thought, their names would be there. And what if they, so I don't think necessarily that students really thought about that. At least that's what some people said to me. Some people thought that their names would be shared, but because we didn't explicitly say that, I didn't feel comfortable. So that's why I changed it for the final, because I felt like it really was important that they knew that their names would be shared. And I mean, I think that most of them thought that they would be, because they gave really detailed feedback and said, connect with me if you have any other questions. But it's just that some people may not have felt that way or known that. Do you have anything to add to that, Jahaira?
And to be honest, as you saw from the document you shared, there was so much feedback that we honestly didn't spend 1 minute looking at who provided. We were so focused on reading the feedback, incorporating it if we could into our project. How do we make it better? So we really didn't, I don't recall ever looking at who, what. No, it was more, let's read the feedback and what do we take out of it to improve the next step of the project, whatever it is, whether it's the pitch or the overview, the presentation. That's really what we focused on. I honestly don't remember paying attention to names, or we were very appreciative. It was so many pages of feedback of all sort of things, what we should do to improve, what was good, what we can do better. So yeah, that's kind of how it went, but it was so helpful. I do agree. I think what I liked about PebblePad too is that experiential piece that you can see as you go, the progress you're making, the growth, things you've accomplished, and it's right there. And I think that's valuable because in other courses, you've done a great job, but you don't really document it in this way. And I really like that, because sometimes now I still go back, I'm like, wow, that looks really good. We did a really good job. Like, we worked so hard, and it's just so nice to be reminded of all the great things that you are able to do and that you have done and documented. So I'm a big fan of PebblePad now. I mean, it's first time using it, and I have only good things to say about it. So.
Actually, that wasn't done, but that is an interesting idea that, it maybe that should be done. And I'm sure there would be ways of incorporating that. Maybe Catherine, you can speak to that.
Yeah, we actually, Diane, we have a group on campus, Masters of Social Work, that are using the external evaluators. And so the students, choose who their evaluator is, who they've been working with on their practicum or whatever. And then that person is able to come in and provide feedback on the student's work. Again, we can provide rubrics, to help guide the kind of feedback that they will give. And we're able also to restrict it so that they only see their own students. They don't see everybody else's work. And we can also, if there's more than one external evaluator giving feedback, we can set it up so that they don't see the other person's, until they have given their own. So there is that feature, which is nice.
That's cool. And is it pretty easy to train the evaluators to be able to do that, like in terms of the interface?
Well, what I can say is the way it had been done before, it's all the email was filtered through the instructor. So it's not perfect, but the instructor has said it has definitely saved me all the time of, collecting all that email, then having to go in and share it with the appropriate person. So there are some people that, we always have to sort of walk through, but they have quite a large group, and they've been using it now for, I think, the last 4 iterations of it. So
cool.
Yeah, happy to talk about that some more with you. Go ahead, Jen.
I do think that would be really a good idea, even for this capstone course, like to be able to incorporate feedback from the client. I think that might be really nice. I also just wanted to say that for the capstone course before this year, there were opportunities for peer feedback, not at the project overview, similar to the project overview and group contract. They had something similar, but I think it was done through hard copy, and it was in person, and it was like shuffling and then shared. So I just think that using PebblePad in this way was very straightforward. Compiling the feedback was very straightforward, and I think it would be good if it was done if the class was in person or if it was online. Either way, it would work very, very well, because it was fairly a straightforward way of doing it, rather than shuffling of papers, or even getting, if you can imagine everyone providing a document or some kind of assessment in Learn and then trying to compile it all together. This does it in a much more automated way. And so that is definitely a benefit. And I know that peer feedback was provided in other years, but just it was much different. Like it was, paper and compilation after that. So I don't think it was done as easily as it was this way. But that being said, it did work well, and it was very easy to use, at least from my perspective. And but it really required some thought and effort to prepare that in advance. I just want to, Katie also asked a question about, did the instructions for the project encourage students to play around with PebblePad? And I don't really know if they did. I think that happened sort of organically, but I actually agree with you that playing around would be a good idea. And so what I would like to do in the future, if doing this course again, is that I would encourage that and actually even, I mean, I think showing examples, the only thing with examples is I think it can stifle creativity sometimes. You don't want, but anyway, it can also encourage it because you can see what's possible. Some students didn't use PebblePad and primarily just put their Word documents on their work, like on their ePortfolio, and then other students used it in a much more creative way.
I'm going to add to that too, Jen. Just a couple of things. I think you can use it to really focus audience-centric communication. And so being able to see the different ways that people presented their work, for example, the time that Jahaira put in, is very much more engaging than the person who probably just threw up the Word documents and had links. We did do, there was another course where the students again had the peer review. And one of the things that the students had said was, even if I didn't comment on my peers, I would get ideas and I would go back to my own and start improving it. So I think the impact on their learning, not just on the giving feedback and being able to get that feedback, I think it also impacted their learning when they had to look through the eyes of their instructor or somebody else as they were giving feedback, and it made them think, oh, I should probably do that on my own as well. So I don't know if you wanted to add to that a bit more, Jahaira, on what impact it had, knowing that you had to give feedback to your peers. How did that impact your learning?
Well, you're right. So even for us, we did a good job at when we went through the other portfolios, like the other teams' portfolio. There were things that we liked too. They were like, oh, for example, for the contract, we didn't include that in our contract. Maybe we should go back and add that into it. So we would go back and add and change it. So I think being able, like you said, to see other people's portfolios gave us ideas to how to improve things. So there is value in seeing other people's work. And in terms of giving feedback, we were appreciative of the feedback received. So we figured, like, also I found we got feedback saying you guys included a lot of details in this section of your group contract. So is it okay we add this to ours? I'm like, oh yeah, we don't care. Go for it, right? Like whatever makes you work as a team better. So it was just a lot of bouncing back ideas between different groups. And I like that it was a group thing, because it would be overwhelming if it was an individual thing. It would be too much going on. Because it was a team, it teaches you to come back and talk, that communication piece among your team and with other groups as well. So it was very, I guess, motivating in a way, and because we knew we had to provide feedback, it's almost like we want to do a good job. I know there's always room for improvement, but let's try and do a good job, because like we are going to get feedback on this and it's a requirement and etc. Right? So there's always that motivation of like, let's try and do our best, right? And yes, I did the backbone, but the group provided feedback, of course, and they said, let's add this, let's add that, and the creativity piece was just like you mentioned. I think playing with it is part of the learning, and you need to try and enjoy it. If you look at it that way, it's almost like a new skill you acquire. Now you can say you know how to make a portfolio online. You never know where that can take you, or how that new skill can help develop something else, right? Because it's all about that learning. So if you look at it that way too, instead of just a requirement that you need to do, and that's how I looked. I'm like, I can add that. I know how to do a PebblePad portfolio, and I didn't know how to do that before the course. I didn't even know about PebblePad. But I'm sure there's different ways that this can be incorporated into other projects that you can do, maybe at work, or if it's like volunteering, you can say, I'm confident that I can create assets in PebblePad. What you need, I can make it happen, right? Because I've done it. So I think that's another nice learning from this, is just for students, just look at it as like, how do I learn something new? It's not just about fulfilling a requirement. It's about your own personal growth, That's how I see it, at least. So whenever I can try and learn something, I try, right? Because it's a good thing to always be curious and want to learn. So I look at it as a skill gained as well.
I definitely think other groups learned from the 3C or Jahaira's group. I think they definitely saw some opportunities for making their PebblePad portfolio more creative. I also just want to say about the peer review process. There were a couple of students that didn't like the idea of having a rubric and felt that it was rigid. But I think when they received the feedback, they realized the value was really, and I emphasize that too, the value was really in the qualitative comments that they got back, because they got rich information that they were able to use for their project.
That's right. Yes. So I agree. The rubric, we didn't even really pay attention to. I mean, it was great, but it doesn't mean anything. This course wasn't graded, and we all know this. It was a pass or fail. So whether, you thought I got a 2 instead of a 3, we didn't even look at it. We went straight into the comments, because that's what will provide us the ideas or the feedback to be able to improve the project. The rubric doesn't tell me anything. You think it's very subjective, right? Like 3, 5, whatever. But how do we make it better? And the ideas our class was really good with that, though. Everybody seemed to be very involved and provided great feedback. So we were really appreciative of that, because we were able to improve the project. And a lot of it was from our peers, because even at the beginning, when we had the social marketing plan, some of our peers were like, are you sure this is doable in the time frame that we have during the course to complete a social marketing plan? It seems a little ambitious. And we're like, no, but they were right, because we did change the plan, right? And it was like, oh, they warned us at the beginning, and how we listened, I guess. But at that time, we thought that client wanted a social marketing plan. But I remember clearly that, because we're like, oh, some of our peers are, questioning whether we're, actually doing a feasible project. What do you guys think? Well, let's go back to the drawing board and talk to our client. And they were correct, right? So even at the beginning with the group contract and the project pitch, people were really thinking through, like, you haven't thought well about this, or maybe spend a little more time and really check your timelines, because it's a lot of what you're trying to accomplish in a short time. So it was honestly really great to work in this course with our class. They were really good, I have to say.
There's a question about how many groups were there. That's 9? A good question. 9, yeah, I think 9 or so. Yeah, 9 groups. So each person had to review 8 other groups.
Yeah, that's correct.
So yeah, everybody needed to provide feedback on each group. But but if there were more groups than that, you could easily divide them into subgroups.
I see Sean do you have another question, Sean? A follow-up to that? Did everyone review all the projects in those groups?
So there was only one, each group had one project. So yes, everyone reviewed the 8 projects. It was recognized, though, that some individuals may provide more detailed feedback on certain projects because of their expertise. So we did acknowledge that everyone had their own specific sort of expertise in public health. And so, and it's probably true that some individuals provided very, very detailed comments on some projects and not as much on others. But we didn't want to, well, because there weren't that many groups, like 8 is not that many to review. So it was actually quite doable for the students. And we didn't want to structure it too much by assigning students. We did consider that. We did consider assigning students who had expertise in various projects. But then because of the numbers, we just decided to go with having each student review each one.
Well, we're waiting for a couple of more questions. Jahaira, can you tell us what it was like having to provide evidence or to document the competencies? So you showed us there were 4 competencies, and then you had to show how you knew you were making progress on those. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Yes. So the instructions said, choose the competency. So we picked them, and it never occurred to us that we had to justify why, because I don't know why. And then when we did the first run and we shared, we noticed right away with our group in the meeting, we're like, every single other group, we were the only ones actually that forgot, didn't think of linking it to the activities within the project that ties with the competencies. So I remember going, okay, so do we add it in here, or do we just worry about the presentation, because it was getting close? So we decided, the team voted not to go back into PebblePad to update it again. So we ended up updating it in the PowerPoint presentation and showcasing it that way. And we were the only ones to do it in the presentation, because everybody else had done it, in their project pitch. So it was a good learning to realize, yes, we followed the instructions, but the rest of the teams went above and beyond to really showcase how it was done, whereas we lacked that link right? But by seeing and noticing that everybody else did it, we said we definitely need to include this and expand further. So yeah, it was a good learning to be like, oh, we did really well, but I think we kind of like lost a few points here, and we did. All the groups were like, you forgot to link. We're like, but that, okay, whatever. We learned our lesson, I guess. So it was good feedback. That was one of our, I guess, weaknesses, was just that section. We didn't link it very well, but we were able, again, to do it in the presentation and go back to PebblePad and update it in the slides. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how people interpret instructions differently. For us, it was select is select, right? Picked 5, done it, whereas other groups really put more thought into it, right? And who knows, maybe we had done that from the start, we would have maybe realized that the project, the social marketing plan, was too ambitious, and we had taken the time to be like, are we really, you know, how much are we trying to accomplish within the timeline? So yes.
And Jen, did you notice a lot of variation in the kinds of evidence that was provided? Because I know your group is undergoing accreditation. So was this of value to you to learn, you know, what people were adding as evidence of their competency?
For this particular project, I would say that they articulated in words primarily, like with specifically, you know, how their project, what specifically in their project they did to accomplish or progress on areas of various competencies. We also have an MPH workbook where students throughout the program add evidence to indicate how they are making progress on the various competencies. And I see a lot of variety in that area. So students put, you know, certificates, they include assignments, they articulate what it was about those assignments that helped them to learn more about the competency. And in some cases, they just add a very short narrative. I try to encourage them to include a little bit more depth, and also maybe even specific, you know, evidence about, you know, what it was, a little bit more detail about what or even add more evidence about how they learned more about the competency. So I've seen lots of different types of examples. Some is more like, some people have also uploaded their transcripts and said, see, I got this mark, so it means that this is the evidence. But I also encourage them to think about what it was about the course, what they learned about the course, what assignment helped them progress in that area. Gail, I see your hands up.
So yeah, so I find this to be a really interesting conversation about evidence and the type of evidence, and the fact that you leave it up to the student to identify, okay, here's this competency on X, Y, or Z, and this is how I think I've met it, instead of saying, okay, to demonstrate X competency, I want to see this type of evidence. So I love the fact that you trust the student to be able, and these are master's students, right? So we would hope that they can identify the appropriate evidence. But a lot of accreditors also say, well, we want to see this very specific thing. So can you tell us about, you know, the type of evidence, and if that evidence does usually hit the mark?
Actually, Gail, that's a great point. We do both. So in our MPH workbook, we have an overview page where we identify all the competencies and where in the program that they will learn more about those competencies. And for accreditation, we just submitted our self-study. For each course or for each competency, we have a specific assessment that assesses that competency. So we've done that, and we've included that, you know, the overview on the MPH workbook page. However, we want the students to tell us where they think they learned, what evidence they feel contributed to their learning and growth in that competency area. And I actually find it's very helpful as an instructor, or as someone sort of that's looking over all of this. I can say, well, the students are saying they're learning about this competency from this course. And in most cases, it's where we anticipate it will be. But in some cases, it's not. And so there's some learning that happens. We also encourage students to use their work experience for that. So in some cases, it might actually be with their work experience or a practicum placement or something like that. And they might be identifying specific competencies. But absolutely, for accreditation, we are very specific about the actual assessment.
The stakes are high, right?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure in your course you only had like the one round, right?
Yeah, so we had just one opportunity for peer review of the group contract and the project overview. We compiled that feedback, shared it back. It gave the group about a month or a little over a month to then modify what they were doing and then incorporate it into their group presentation. And then there was an opportunity for the peer, like the class, to provide feedback on the group presentations. And then it gave the class a little over a month to respond to those changes and then submit their written report, which needed to be was assessed by the TA and myself.
Yeah, that's not to say that as a group you wouldn't be working together and giving each other feedback on what you're doing, right? So, you're not getting the formal feedback, but you are getting that external feedback, at least one revision of it. So I can make a comment on that, but Jen, I was wondering if you or Jahaira want to, or anyone, jump in.
Well, for this project, the peer feedback could be like formative feedback, or it could also be worth a weighting of a grade. For sure, it could be either, because if you have a rubric, you can actually assign grades based on the peer feedback. Or it could be formative in the sense that you're not actually assigning grades for the peer feedback, or you could do it using grades, a specific weighting, and then the faculty member could provide the final assessment at the end. But I actually think the peer feedback, you could use the rubric and you could assign grades, and then you could actually have a grade instead of just pass fail.
I don't know. Natalie, I know you're working with someone who is actually assigning grades to the feedback, so I don't know if you wanted to say a little bit about that process.
Sure, I was just about to type actually in response to Jennifer's question, but I'm working with an instructor. They are using peer feedback for reflective journals in their course, where students are adding journal entries each week throughout the term, and they're actually organized into groups of, I think, around 4 or 5, so that it is a good size to be able to read through everyone's entries. And this particular instructor, they're using Learn for the grading, so they're not actually using a rubric and PebblePad, and they chose to kind of separate Learn and PebblePad. So definitely you can use it for grading within the course. And Jennifer, I'd be happy to chat with you like following the session or whenever you're ready to chat about that. And I find with PebblePad, it's very unique. And as you've seen today, like there are so many different features and ways it could be used. So there's probably a lot more out there that I don't even know about yet. So yeah, happy to chat.